Well, that is now wrong because we see what's happening in the mortgage market and in the economy.
Is there anything that he said today that might have influenced Congress people to do something one way or the other?
I don't know if they're looking for him for influence because Congress has its own mind and its own agenda. I think what you saw today from people like Senator Dodd is building the case for Congress to jump in and maybe do some more. You know, there's this push for more regulation in regards to mortgages. We're going to see a push for GSE reform. We interviewed Senator Dodd right after the hearing, and he talked about the need to get the reform of the oversight of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac through Congress, and also FHA reform. So it's not that they want the endorsement of Mr. Bernanke. They'll do it without him. But I guess, you know, you raise a good point. It would be good to have his endorsement, but he doesn't go that way. He just kind of, like we were joking, always very steady, very monotone.
Yeah, I wonder if he works at that or if he's always spoken like that. I don't know. Thank you very much, Adam Shapiro. Great to see you in Washington. Well, here in studio, we have Rod Kurtz. He's senior editor of Inc. magazine. Stephanie Allwater of SmartMoney.com. And in San Francisco, Michael E. Parker of Stellar Enterprises. And Michael, we brought you in because you deal in the real world, not inside the Beltway. You deal with business. How does a businessman such as yourself look at what Bernanke says and does?
Well, right now, I mean, we're not very happy when we look across the whole business world. There's some serious problems out here. And I think when you think about all the talk and all of the things being told to us that we already know, we're looking for solutions. And I personally think that he, as well as the whole federal government, needs to be talking about something a lot more serious to stimulate the economy. We got families at stake, businesses at stake, people's lives at stake. And if we don't jump in and do something more aggressive, this is all going to be talk that is meaningless and not actually solving any problems at all.
Well, let me explain what you do, which could also help to explain your anxiety about the situation. You're in real estate. Real estate out on the West Coast where it is dropping, I guess, not as quickly in San Francisco as it is down south, correct?
That's correct. It's a disaster out here in California. As you know, we're in several industries. We're actually a private equity firm that manages several subsidiaries. Some are in retail, some are in real estate. And when you look at the fact that the real estate market has dropped, the lenders are hurting, the borrowers are hurting. And now, even if we do anything with interest rates, everyone's credit cards are maxed out. People can't keep their credit scores high. And in the retail industry, people aren't spending because they're in a frozen situation where they can't even move.
But, Michael, Bernanke dropped the Fed funds rate, he and his fellow governors, 1.25% in 8 days not long ago. What more can he do?
Well, I think he should be crying out for the people like me, the entrepreneurs, the corporations, the middle-class America that's out there trying to survive. It's his job not just to lower rates or raise rates, but to talk to the president and talk to everyone up there on the Hill and let them know that we have a crisis on our hands and we need to pull together and do more, do absolutely what is necessary. And who says we have to do it the way we've always done it? We shouldn't be stuck in traditional ways of doing things. We need a non-traditional solution. We have a non-traditional problem.
Well, Rod, you understand his anxiety when you're dealing out in California real estate, but at the same time, there is this very clear separation of what he does from the political process. Maybe now's the time to change that.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think that you mentioned before he's very even-keeled deliberately. I mean, this has always been when you're looking at the Fed. It's like reading the tea leaves, and often for good reason. Bernanke, in some ways, has been even more open than some of his predecessors. So I think that I can understand his wanting to hear a little more and having Bernanke play a more active role, but I don't know that that's the role for the Fed chairman.
Stephanie, I used to cover Latin America. I did it for about 12 years. When you go to a Latin American country or a third world country where you have the politicians interfering, injecting themselves in monetary decisions, you can have disaster, utter disaster. So there are good reasons why that barrier between politicians and the Fed is there.
I completely agree. It is not Bernanke's job to save the economy, and I do think that there certainly is legitimate criticism that he was slow to recognize the severity of the problem, slow to move on cutting those interest rates. But it's not really his job, or I would argue the government's job, to really interfere too much. To a certain extent, these markets sort of have to correct this themselves and kind of pull themselves out of this.
All right. We also have Greg Robb from MarketWatch.com with us. And Greg, there's been a lot of criticism, all of this, all these compliments notwithstanding, about whether he has moved too quickly or whether he waited too long in the first place. What do you think about the job Bernanke's been doing?
You know, I think I give Bernanke a pretty good grade. I'd give him a B. I'd give him an A for monetary policy, and then I would give him a C or maybe even a D+ for communication. I think he's just really fumbled the communications. That's where his.
So you agree with Michael that he should do more to step out and reassure the markets, reassure the world that things are better. But what good would those reassurances do?
Well, I don't think necessarily people want to be reassured. I think people want to understand how he looks at things. He's a very intelligent guy, and he understands, I think, more than any of us what is happening with the economy now. And I think people just want to have a clear understanding of how he sees things. They want to know, that's what they want.
Well, Michael, let me just go back to you for a second, because we didn't really spell out exactly what you would like him to do that he's not doing. As I mentioned before, I have seen when monetary policy has been interfered with by politicians, and I can tell you it can get to be very messy.
Well, I'm not saying so much for him to interfere as much as I am saying for him to make it clear what is actually happening. A lot of the things that we're hearing are things that we already know. We want to hear exactly what is the true problem and how can we resolve this. I'm not an economist. That's not my forte, but I'm in the real-life community, in the trenches, trying to help others fulfill the American dream.
I understand, but Michael, just 6 months ago, he was saying that the subprime mess was going to be contained. Clearly, he was wrong then, so maybe he is being upfront with it. He's just not always right.
Well, but I agree that in terms of being upfront, it is important also to be right. And I think even though he has communicated some things, I don't think everything has been extremely clear with respect to what the true problems are. And I also agree with you, he's not always right.
Yeah, that's for sure right. He's made mistakes, but virtually it's sort of like I make the analogy with the WMDs. Everybody was wrong about this particular problem and how it's spelled out.
I sort of look at the Fed chairman in a way, use an analogy for our profession. He's almost like a copy editor, that he never gets any credit when everything goes right, and anytime anything goes wrong, that's when everyone notices. So, I understand what Michael's getting at, because I think that for better or for worse, the Fed chairman has almost become the face of the economy, and people look to him and blame him when things go wrong and don't necessarily give him credit when things go right. But that's sort of a problem, and I can understand the desire to have more communication.
By the way, in lockstep with him today was Hank Paulson, the Treasury Secretary. He made some comments about the numbers that are coming out with regard to the subprime.